Commander Elia's heart had faced countless alien worlds in his career, but none had felt like this. The moment his ship touched down on the planet, a strange chill ran through him, though the air was warm. The ground beneath him glimmered faintly, as if sprinkled with tiny stars. His pulse quickened, but not from fear. This was excitement, the kind that only comes when one knows they are about to step into something extraordinary. Humans were often called fragile, small, and inexperienced in the galactic arena. Yet here he was, a single human among a civilization that had evolved beyond imagination, and his heart told him that courage was a language everyone understood. The palace ahead was enormous, carved from a material that seemed alive. Its walls shimmered in shifting colors that Elias couldn't name, and the surface reflected his image in strange, twisted ways. Every step he took made the colors ripple, like water disturbed by a falling stone. It was beautiful, breathtaking, and unsettling all at once. He had read reports about the alien princess who lived inside. Legends painted her as untouchable, a being of such grace and power that even the bravest diplomats feared to meet her. But Elias was not just a diplomat. He was a human soldier, trained to move forward when others hesitated, trained to face what seemed impossible. And today, he would prove that humans could enter even the most sacred places without fear. As he approached the palace gates, the air seemed to thicken. It hummed faintly, a vibration that resonated with his bones. Elias felt as if the building itself was alive, watching him, judging him. His mind raced with stories of other species who had failed at first contact, but he forced himself to breathe slowly, reminding himself that hesitation could be fatal here. Every step forward was a choice, to retreat or to show that humanity's strength lay not in weapons or technology, but in heart and courage. The gate opened before him without a sound, as if acknowledging his presence. Elias stepped inside and was immediately surrounded by a light that seemed to bend around him, making the walls appear to float. The chamber was vast, impossibly tall, and Elias felt his human lungs struggle for a moment, not from lack of oxygen, but from the awe that made the world feel too big for him. Every surface gleamed with colors that changed depending on his angle of vision. Shadows danced across the walls in patterns he could not comprehend. It was mesmerizing, and he realized that this palace was a statement, a declaration of the princess's power, beauty, and intellect. Elias moved cautiously, boots echoing in the empty hall. He noticed small symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly. He did not understand their meaning, but he sensed their purpose, to communicate, to warn, to reveal. The air smelled faintly of something sweet and metallic, and for a moment, Elias thought he heard soft whispers, almost like the palace itself was trying to speak. His pulse quickened, but he did not stop. Every step made him feel alive, as if the universe itself had aligned to this singular moment. For the first time in his life, Elias felt the weight of history on his shoulders. He was not just representing humanity, he was proving that humans could confront the unknown with dignity, courage, and intelligence. He thought of his family back home, the people who believed in him even when he doubted himself. He thought of humanity as a whole, often underestimated, often mocked, but still enduring, still reaching, still striving. Every fiber of his being knew that the moment he stepped further into this palace, he would no longer be just a human among stars. He would be a human who dared, a human who reminded the galaxy that courage could shine brighter than fear. And then from deep within the palace he felt it, a presence subtle but undeniable. It was the first hint that the alien princess was near. Elias froze, every sense alert. The stories were true. Something extraordinary awaited him. Something that would test every skill, every belief, every ounce of his human courage. And yet he stepped forward anyway because stepping back was never an option. He was human, and humans never gave up. As Commander Elias' heart moved deeper into the palace, the light shifted in ways that made him dizzy. The walls no longer reflected his image clearly. Instead, they seemed alive, pulsating softly like the heartbeat of the entire building. Strange, faint voices floated around him, too subtle to understand, yet impossible to ignore. They whispered in a language he could not know, a mixture of tones that made the hairs on his arms rise. Every step felt heavier, not from fatigue, but from the weight of being watched. Yet Elias did not stop. His mind reminded him, humans are observers, learners, and doers. This palace, for all its alien beauty, could not intimidate him. Shadows stretched across the floor, twisting into forms that seemed almost real. At first, Elias thought he saw figures moving in the periphery of his vision, but when he blinked, they vanished, leaving only the glowing walls behind. The whispers grew louder, almost musical, like a delicate song. It was unsettling, but also strangely inviting. The palace seemed to test him to see whether his courage was genuine or merely a show. He realized then that the alien princess had designed this space not for decoration, but as a trial, a measure of intent. Only those who could remain calm and observant would reach her. Elias' mind flashed briefly to the countless legends he had read, tales of humans who had entered alien territories only to vanish, of diplomats who had bowed in fear, of warriors who had stumbled because they underestimated what lay before them. He felt a strange mix of pride and determination. Yes, humans were small, their technology simple compared to this civilization, but they were survivors. They could endure, adapt, and find solutions when all else failed. That thought steadied him as the floor beneath him shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. He adjusted his stance, noticing that each step now required careful observation. The hall twisted and turned in ways that normal architecture. There were no right angles, no familiar geometry, yet Elias moved with a quiet confidence. Each step he took was a statement. Humanity could navigate the unknown not by brute strength but by perception, patience, and intuition. He focused on the sounds, the whispers, the subtle movements of light, and slowly he began to understand the rhythm of this place. It was as if the palace itself was teaching him, guiding him closer to the presence he sought. Suddenly, a soft glow appeared ahead, brighter than anything he had seen in the hall so far. Elias' heart raced. This had to be a sign he was getting closer. But with the light came a sense of unease. The shadows around him seemed to stretch toward him, almost like tendrils, and the whispers shifted tone, sharp and questioning. Elias drew in a deep breath, steadying himself. Humans were often underestimated in the galaxy for their size, their fragility. But here, in this moment, his persistence, his calmness, and his courage were proof that humans could stand against the most alien of trials. As he approached the glowing center, Elias sensed a presence, something intelligent, aware, and powerful. It was no longer just the palace, it was the princess herself, calling him forward without words. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, loud and proud, a declaration of life and determination. He realized that every step he had taken, every challenge the hall had presented was a preparation for this encounter. He was ready. Humans may have been small in the universe, but courage had no size. Strength had no limit when combined with heart. For a brief moment, Elias paused, closing his eyes. He felt awe, fear, and anticipation all at once. And then he stepped forward into the heart of the hall, knowing that soon he would see her, the alien princess, the being who could change not only his life, but the way humanity was seen in the galaxy. Whatever happened next, he would meet it with humanity's unyielding spirit, with every bit of courage and heart he possessed. Commander Elias' heart stepped into the central chamber, and the air shifted instantly. The whispers he had heard in the hall vanished, replaced by a heavy, almost tangible silence. It was a quiet that pressed against his ears and chest, a presence that seemed alive, aware of every heartbeat. The chamber was enormous, stretching higher than any human city building, and every surface glimmered with colors that danced and shimmered like liquid light. He felt small, fragile, and yet strangely unafraid. Humans had survived in a galaxy that often dismissed them. They had learned to endure. This was only another test, and Elias felt ready. From the far end of the room, a faint glow drew his eyes. At first, it seemed like a reflection from the walls, a trick of the light. But then the glow began to shift, moving like a living thing. Elias' breath caught. Shapes formed within the light, delicate, fluid, almost unreal. The stories had not done her justice. The alien princess was not just a figure of legend. She was a being of elegance, power, and mystery, and her presence alone filled the chamber with energy. She moved closer, her figure both familiar and alien. Every motion was graceful, as if she glided rather than walked, her form rippling in colors Elias had never seen before. He could sense the intelligence behind every gesture, the awareness that she was studying him as carefully as he studied her. Elias' heart pounded, not out of fear, but out of the awe that comes from witnessing something extraordinary. Humans had always looked up at the stars, dreaming of what they could not reach. And now here he was, face to face with that dream. Her eyes, when they finally met his, were like windows into distant galaxies. They held knowledge, curiosity, and something else, an unexpected spark of interest. Elias felt it pierce straight through him, a reminder that connection was not limited by species or language. Even without words, he could feel her thoughts brushing against his mind, tentative yet confident, and he realized that this was not just an encounter, it was a meeting of spirits. He took a careful step forward, trying to steady himself. Humans were small, often underestimated, and yet they had a resilience that no alien technology could diminish. Every human action carried intention, and every step he had taken to reach this chamber had been an act of courage. The princess tilted her head slightly, studying him, and for the first time, Elias thought he saw a flicker of surprise in her expression. Perhaps she had not expected a human to arrive unafraid, unshaken, unbent by the challenges of her palace. Elias' eyes roamed over her form. She shimmered like starlight, her hair flowing as if moved by unseen currents. Her movements were precise, controlled, and yet there was a softness in her posture, a gentle grace that suggested she was more than her legend. He realized that humans often assumed alien beings were cold or distant, but here was proof that empathy and awareness existed even across worlds. He felt a wave of pride for his species. Humans might not be as technologically advanced, but they could reach hearts and minds in ways that sheer intellect alone could not. Then, without warning, she stepped closer still, and the room seemed to pulse with her presence. Elias felt the weight of destiny in that moment, not just his own, but that of humanity. The first glimpse of the alien princess was more than a vision. It was a challenge, a promise, and a test all at once. Humans had reached farther than they knew, and in this instant he understood that courage, patience, and heart could shine brighter than any star. He straightened his posture, meeting her gaze directly. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever mysteries awaited, he would face them. He was human, and humans did not shy away from the unknown. The first glimpse of the princess was no longer just awe, it was recognition. Two beings from entirely different worlds had met, and something deep inside Elias told him this encounter would change everything. The alien princess studied Commander Elias' heart with eyes that seemed to see into the depths of his soul. "You are human," she said softly, her voice like a melody that resonated without sound. "Why do you come here where others fear to tread?" Elias straightened, feeling the weight of her gaze, the judgment of a species far older and wiser than his own. "Because my people believe in courage," he said steadily. "Because humans do not run from the unknown, and because I had to see with my own eyes." For a moment, silence stretched between them, long enough for him to feel the chamber itself shift around him. The air thickened, and the floor beneath his feet glowed faintly, as if alive. Shadows moved unnaturally, stretching toward him and then retreating. Elias realized this was no ordinary palace, it was a living test. Every step he had taken had brought him closer, but now he had to prove that human courage was more than words. It was action. Without warning, the floor changed. Panels rose and fell beneath him, glowing edges creating a path that required careful navigation. One misstep could mean falling into a void that seemed endless. The whispers returned, more urgent now, brushing against his mind, testing his focus. He could feel the princess observing him, measuring his resolve. Humans were small, fragile, unassuming, but this moment was proof that determination could match any challenge. Elias advanced cautiously, placing one foot after another with deliberate care. The light from the floor shifted, creating illusions that made the room seem larger, twisting walls that tried to confuse him. He blinked, refocusing, remembering every lesson from his years in the field. Keep calm, observe, adapt. Each step became a declaration of human resilience. He would not falter. He would not yield. He would meet this test with every ounce of his strength. A sudden burst of light flared from the chamber walls, creating moving images of alien landscapes and strange creatures. The illusions were mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, but Elias forced himself to look past them. He realized the princess was showing him fragments of her world, not to frighten him, but to see if he could remain grounded, if he could hold on to his humanity while surrounded by wonders beyond imagination. He breathed slowly, counting each exhale, letting the calm of his training guide him through the chaos. Halfway across the chamber, the floor tilted slightly, requiring him to shift his weight carefully. For a brief moment, he stumbled, and his heart leapt in panic. But then he regained balance, smiling to himself. Humans were often underestimated, he thought, but it was moments like these that defined them. It was not size, speed, or power that mattered. It was the ability to persevere, to adapt, to meet the impossible with determination and heart. The princess stepped closer, her form radiant, casting light and shadow across the chamber. "Few have come this far," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "Even fewer have stayed unbroken." Elias paused, meeting her gaze. In that moment he understood that she was not trying to intimidate him. She was testing him, preparing him, teaching him the essence of her people. And he felt pride swell in his chest, not for himself, but for humanity. Humans were often overlooked, underestimated, mocked. But they had heart, and that heart had brought him here, unafraid, steady, alive. Finally, he reached the center of the chamber, the floor settling beneath him like a calm sea after a storm. The illusions vanished, leaving only him and the princess facing each other in pure clarity. Elias realized then that courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. And in that quiet, suspended moment, he knew he had passed her test. Not through strength, not through skill, but through the unyielding spirit that defined his species. The princess smiled faintly, a gesture that was both approval and acknowledgement. "You are human," she said again, this time with warmth. "And yet you are unlike any I have known." Elias bowed slightly, feeling the weight of the chamber lift, replaced by a strange sense of unity. He had faced the challenge, and in doing so, he had shown what humans could achieve, not by conquering worlds, but by daring to enter them with courage and heart. Elias stood at the center of the chamber, breathing steadily despite the thrill and tension that surged through him. The shifting lights had finally settled, leaving him bathed in a calm, soft glow that seemed to come from the princess herself. And then she revealed her true form. It was unlike anything he had imagined. Her skin shimmered with subtle iridescence, catching the light like liquid crystal. Her eyes held entire galaxies, swirling with colors that were impossible to name, deep and endless. Her presence radiated power, intelligence, and a beauty so profound it almost hurt to look at. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had seen wonders in the stars, but none had moved him like this. The alien princess was not just royalty or legend. She was the living embodiment of her people's brilliance. Her movements were graceful and fluid, like a dance that transcended gravity itself. Even the light seemed to bend around her, acknowledging her presence. Elias realized that she did not need weapons, fleets, or armies. Her very being was a force that could shape minds and command respect. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was filled with mutual observation, understanding, and a strange recognition that transcended species. Elias felt a wave of emotion he had never known. Awe, fear, respect, and something softer, warmer, something almost like hope. This was the moment every human explorer dreamed of but few ever experienced. A direct encounter with a being so alien, so extraordinary, and yet somehow approachable. "You have come far," the princess said at last, her voice both melodic and firm. It resonated in the chamber, echoing not as sound but as a sensation that brushed against his mind. Elias nodded. "I had to," he replied, his voice steady. "Humans reach for what seems impossible. We face fear because it reminds us we are alive, and I wanted to see you." The princess tilted her head, studying him carefully. Elias could feel the weight of her attention, the way her gaze seemed to peer into his thoughts without intrusion. There was curiosity there, yes, but also something deeper, a quiet admiration, the acknowledgement of human courage and determination. He realized then that legends did not always tell the whole story. Courage, empathy, and persistence were qualities her people valued, even if humans had never been thought capable of them. Slowly, she stepped closer, her form shimmering in the soft light. Elias could feel the subtle energy radiating from her, not threatening but alive, aware, almost breathing with him. Each movement was precise, delicate, yet powerful, like the flow of a river that could carve mountains if left unchecked. His human instincts told him to step back, to brace for danger. But another part of him, the part that had carried him through impossible trials, urged him forward. He had earned this moment, earned her trust, earned the right to simply stand in her presence. "You are different from the others," she said quietly. "Not because you are human, but because you are unafraid to be yourself. You face the unknown without denying who you are." Elias swallowed, understanding that these words were both a recognition and a lesson. Humans had survived, thrived, and sometimes stumbled, but courage and heart always defined them. It was a trait that could not be measured in technology or speed, yet it shone brighter than any alien marvel he had seen. Elias' heart swelled with pride, not for himself, but for humanity. for all the small, underestimated people who reached for the stars, for the countless explorers, thinkers, dreamers, and soldiers who dared to confront the unknown. He realized that in this chamber, on this distant planet, humanity's essence had been recognized and honored by a being far greater than himself. The princess extended her hand toward him, a gesture of trust and connection. Elias hesitated only for a moment before taking it. Warmth, light, and a sense of understanding flowed between them. In that instant, he knew this encounter would change everything: his life, his people, and perhaps even the galaxy's perception of humanity. The alien princess, in revealing herself fully, had shown Elias not just her power, but her respect and belief in what humans could be. And for the first time, he felt entirely seen, not as a human among stars, not as a soldier or explorer, but as a being worthy of wonder, trust, and recognition. After the revelation, the chamber seemed almost still, yet alive with an energy that Elias could feel pulsing around him. The alien princess remained in front of him, her eyes like twin galaxies, watching, waiting, as if she were measuring not just his courage, but his essence. Elias' heartbeat had slowed slightly, yet the thrill of the encounter still vibrated in his chest. For a long moment, they simply stood there, two beings from entirely different worlds, connected by a fragile thread of understanding. Then, without words, a subtle exchange began. Thoughts, emotions, and visions flowed between them like water finding its way through hidden channels. Elias felt glimpses of her world, cities that floated in the sky, oceans that shimmered with bioluminescent life, forests that hummed with consciousness. He saw her people, their intelligence, their culture, their devotion to knowledge and beauty. And with each image, he understood more of why she had challenged him in the hall, why the palace had tested his courage. She was not merely observing him. She was offering him insight into her world, sharing it so he could truly see and feel it. Elias returned the gesture, offering glimpses of humanity, bustling cities, serene forests, stormy oceans, and quiet moments of human connection. He shared memories of his home, of laughter and loss, of hope that persisted even in darkness. She absorbed it all, her expressions shifting, subtle yet profound, as if each human emotion carried weight in ways he had never realized. He understood then that connection was more than comprehension. It was resonance, the echo of heart and courage across the void. As the exchange continued, Elias began to feel something deeper than awe or curiosity. There was respect, yes, but also a fragile sense of trust. The princess, who had seemed untouchable, distant, and almost mythical, was opening herself to him. And in response, Elias felt his own heart soften. Humans were often underestimated because they wore their emotions openly, but that vulnerability had power. It had carried him through the trials of her palace, and now it allowed him to connect across an unfathomable divide. The princess's gaze softened as she finally spoke aloud, her voice calm and melodic. "Few beings have reached this understanding," she said. "Even fewer could do so without fear, without pretense. You are human, and yet you see more than many of my own people do." Elias felt a warmth spread through him, not pride alone, but a quiet joy that humanity's essence, its courage, heart, and curiosity, could shine even here among stars far beyond Earth. Time seemed to stretch and twist around them. Hours could have passed, or mere moments. In this shared space, time felt fluid. They exchanged visions of hope and struggle, dreams and fears. Elias showed her humanity's imperfections, its conflicts, its flaws, but also its persistence, its ability to rise after defeat, its unyielding spirit. She mirrored him with visions of her own people's struggles, their losses, and their triumphs. In this moment, Elias realized that two entirely different species could share not just information, but emotion, and through that sharing, form a bond that transcended language, culture, and biology. Finally, the princess stepped closer, her hand hovering near his. Elias felt the subtle pulse of her presence, not invasive, but inclusive, inviting trust. "You understand," she said quietly, "the essence of what we both hold dear: courage, respect, and the desire to connect beyond fear." Elias nodded, words unnecessary. In that silence, both recognized a truth far older than either species. Connection was the bridge that allowed life to thrive, to endure, and to inspire. For the first time, Elias felt the universe shrink, not to diminish him, but to reveal how vast understanding could be. Here, on a distant planet, he was not merely a human soldier or explorer. He was a being capable of forming bonds that crossed species and worlds. And the alien princess, once untouchable and distant, had become more than legend. She had become a mirror of possibility, a proof that courage and heart could light the darkest corners of any galaxy. The chamber grew quieter, though the energy between Elias and the princess remained alive, vibrant, and almost tangible. The soft glow of her presence bathed him in colors he could not name, and for a moment he simply stood there, absorbing the enormity of the experience. He had entered this palace a human among aliens, a soldier among beings of legend. Now he realized that he had become something more, a bridge between worlds, proof that courage and heart could resonate across even the most impossible divides. The princess extended her hand toward him again, her eyes holding a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something softer, something he could not yet name. Elias hesitated only briefly before reaching out. The instant their hands touched, warmth spread through him, a connection that was more than physical. It was understanding, trust, and acknowledgement, all wrapped together in a single, undeniable bond. In that moment, he knew that humans were seen for who they truly were, not as weak, insignificant beings, but as creatures capable of bravery, empathy, and unyielding resolve. "You have shown what few can," the princess said, her voice flowing through his mind like music. "You have faced the unknown without fear. You have carried your people's courage into my world, and for that you are honored." Elias felt a rush of emotion, pride, yes, but also humility. He understood that this honor was not for himself alone, but for every human who had dared to reach for the stars, who had dared to step forward when others had faltered. Humanity's spirit, fragile yet unbreakable, had been recognized here. He looked around the chamber one last time. The walls shimmered like liquid, reflecting not only light but the energy of life itself. He thought of the palace as a living entity, a guardian of knowledge, beauty, and power. And he understood that the princess, as its heart, was more than a ruler. She was a symbol of what could exist when courage met wisdom. Elias felt a quiet gratitude that he had been chosen to witness this, to prove that humans could be worthy of wonder, not just as conquerors, but as beings of empathy and resolve. The princess stepped closer, her gaze softening. "You are human, yet you carry a light that is rare," she said. "Do not let it fade. Your people need it, and perhaps the universe needs it too." Elias nodded, words failing him for once. He had faced trials, illusions, and the impossible to reach her, but now he understood the true lesson. Courage was not only about facing danger. It was about carrying your heart boldly into the unknown and letting it shine even when the world seemed indifferent. With a final, gentle gesture, the princess guided him toward the exit. Elias turned for one last look at the chamber, the palace, the being who had changed his life. The vision would remain with him forever, a reminder that humans, though small in the vastness of space, could make their mark through heart, bravery, and persistence. He had entered seeking knowledge and proof, but he was leaving with something far greater: connection, respect, and the validation of his species' worth. As Elias stepped onto the path leading back to his ship, the princess's voice lingered in his mind. "Remember, human, you are more than what you know. Your courage is your gift. Share it, and it will light the stars." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle within him. For the first time, he felt completely at peace with both himself and humanity. They had faced the unknown, and in doing so, had proven their place among the stars. Elias reached his ship, and as the engines hummed to life, he looked back once more at the palace. The princess stood at the entrance, a vision of grace, strength, and brilliance, her form glowing softly in the fading light. And in that moment, he knew that humans had achieved something extraordinary, not through conquest or force, but through courage, heart, and the simple act of stepping forward when others might have faltered. The ship lifted from the ground, carrying him back to the stars, but the memory, the connection, and the lesson would remain. Humanity had been seen, understood, and honored. And for Elias, the human who had dared to enter the palace, that was more than enough. It was proof that humans, small and fragile though they might seem, could shine brighter than any star if they carried courage and heart within them.